It's starting to sound like Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins may be a safer bet in this year's NFL draft for the New Orleans Saints than Arizona's Tetairoa McMillan. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're playing a little this or that with first and second round NFL draft prospects at big need positions for the New Orleans Saints. We'll take a look at Michigan cornerback Will Johnson up against Ole Miss corner Trey Amos. We'll pit Penn State Tyler Warren, the big tight end, up against LSU's Mason Taylor, and we'll try not to be homers about it. And we'll lead everything off with a big conversation with the big-bodied wide receivers. Jayden Higgins in the second round might be a better bet than Tetairoa McMillan in the first. We got all that and much more for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm starting to think Jayden Higgins might be a better bet in the second round than Tetairoa McMillan in the first round. The only big question is, will Jayden Higgins be there when the New Orleans Saints are on the clock at pick number 40? Teams starting to kind of, starting to hear more and more around maybe some of the skittishness around Tetairoa McMillan. And because of that, a guy like Jayden Higgins, who comes off as this completely kind of clean prospect from a character perspective, from a study perspective, from a hard work perspective, all these other things, might creep into the first round in a way that maybe we didn't expect. And that could be bad news for the New Orleans Saints, could be good news for the New Orleans Saints. But I got to say, 6'4" versus 6'4", 210 plus pounds versus 210 plus pounds, 4.47 speed versus 4.58 speed, good route runner versus struggling to get off of press coverage. Jayden Higgins is coming out on the right side of every single one of these conversations all of a sudden. And it's really interesting because remember, I'm a guy that had Tetairoa McMillan as a can't-miss prospect for the New Orleans Saints. And I don't know if I can necessarily continue to say that. I'm not even worried about the video that leaked around the idea that there were, I don't like to do film study by myself, and I don't like to watch film by myself. I don't really like football and all this stuff. But now all of a sudden, there's all these other question marks about want to play and love for the game. They might be nothing. It might be teams planting that kind of information in the hopes that Tetairoa McMillan falls out of the top 10 and becomes the steal of the century for some team. But at the same time, would you take the guy that has the questions when there's a similarly talented guy that doesn't have any of the questions? I would go so far as to wonder, and I'll be very curious your thoughts on this, would you be willing to take Jayden Higgins at number 9 overall as a top 10 wide receiver, because maybe starting to have some trouble here understanding what's delineating or differentiating between the two wideouts? Now, I'm not advocating for that, but I wonder what it is about Tetairoa McMillan now that keeps him locked in at number 9 or keeps him locked in as a top 10, top 15 prospect, when historically, over the course of the last couple of decades, players that put up his testing numbers from a speed perspective at that position don't get drafted that highly. Shout out to our good friend Nick Cattles over at the Locked On Patriots podcast, who shared that study. So then you work off of that to a guy that's got 4.47 speed, a guy that is 6'4", 217 pounds, a guy that is a fantastic route runner and has the requisite sort of nuance in his route running to be a 3-level threat that can go out there and catch contested passes, that can go out there and be a run blocker for you. What is it about Jayden Higgins that makes him a second-round prospect versus that which makes Tetairoa McMillan a top 10, top 15 prospect? I think the lines are starting to blur. And now what we have to wonder is, are these situations where the question marks of the study perspective, the want perspective, the love of football perspective, are all of these things coming out because teams are simply trying to get Tetairoa McMillan to fall? Or is this finally media catching up with what the teams already knew? And so it might not be a gas mask on draft day type of a situation, but goodness gracious, is it one right now for Tetairoa McMillan that could end up resulting in a little bit of a free fall? Remember that year that DK Metcalf was supposed to be the first wide receiver off the board? It was supposed to be a top 10 guy and top 15 guy, and he ended up going in the second round. Could we see that for a Tetairoa McMillan while all these other wide receivers, Matthew Golden, Alec Ayumanner out of Stanford, Matthew Golden, of course, out of Texas, the smaller, sort of speedier wide receiver who really does a little bit of everything. He's not just a speed guy. And Jayden Higgins, the big-bodied, three-level threat, precise route runner, clean character check, athletic, big-time vertical, go up and get it, run blocking, willing to do it all, dirty work type of player, maybe leaps up ahead of this guy. And so it's really interesting. Do you go with the top-end potential of a McMillan, or are you less willing to take that risk and instead more willing to turn in the safer pick and say, you know what, going to take somebody else at 9 and then wait and see if Jayden Higgins is there at 40? Here's what I think. I think Jayden Higgins is going to be a fantastic pro in the league. Whether he goes in the first round or the second round, I know the history of second and third round wide receivers over the course of the past few years has not been friendly particularly. But I think Jayden Higgins has everything that you need, box check after box check after box check, to be the exception to that rule, and might even go in the first round anyway. And so let me present this hypothetical to you. Let's say the New Orleans Saints take a quarterback at number 9, which I'm still not convinced they will A, have the chance to do, or B, that they should do. Outside of obviously specific circumstances where a top guy is sitting there for you, unbeknownst or completely unexpected. But you do that, you go with a quarterback at 9, or you take an edge rusher at 9, or Mason Graham falls, and you take the defensive tackle in the top 10. And then you decide, you know what, I really want that wide receiver that checks all these boxes, that's got a clean character, that doesn't have the question marks, that doesn't present the risk, and presents all the same reward as the guy that we considered the consensus number 1 wideout in this draft. I'm going to trade back into the first round to grab him. I think I'm at a point now where I'd rather have Jayden Higgins than have Tetairoa McMillan, if the reports are accurate. But if it's the New Orleans Saints out there spreading some stuff trying to get him to fall to 9, I respect the game. I respect the game. All things are possible. The NFL draft is not always what it seems. We'll see which way it all goes. But it does become a very interesting conversation. Would you rather Jayden Higgins in the second round or late in the first round, whatever it might be, or would you rather Tetairoa McMillan? And what is it that makes Tetairoa McMillan a top 15 selection that doesn't make Jayden Higgins a top 15 selection? Very curious situation. But I'm almost to a point now to where I'd rather see the New Orleans Saints walk away with Jayden Higgins. Or if I'm an NFL team, I'd rather walk away with Jayden Higgins than I would Tetairoa McMillan. But maybe, just maybe, it's the PR attack working. We'll see. Coming up next, there's no conversation about character or hard work when it comes to Tyler Warren and Mason Taylor. So what's the dividing situation that could potentially lead to one being preferred over the other? It's all about what's on the field. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Gametime, the absolute best place to go when it comes to buying tickets and getting them at an affordable rate, especially when you're looking for last-minute tickets as well, because sometimes tickets get even cheaper the closer you get to the event. Over on Gametime right now, Hamilton tickets, as Hamilton is in town here in New Orleans, for less than $150. And if you're a Broadway person, if you're a musicals person, if you're a Hamilton person, you know that's a pretty good dang deal to be able to get Hamilton tickets for $150 even now even now. So go and check them out today. You can get it for less than $150. And you can see your view from the seat. You can check out the game time picks as well. And of course, get those last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off by buying last minute tickets over at Gametime today. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, family, doing a little this or that. We're taking a look at first round prospects versus, let's call them day two prospects. We broke down, I don't know, man, I'm just kind of feeling Jayden Higgins over Tetairoa McMillan at this point, but maybe I'm just getting fooled. I don't know. You let me know. But here's where I'm not going to get fooled. All right. I love Louisiana, but I'm not going to take Mason Taylor over Tyler Warren. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And you can't take my Louisiana card because I was born with it. You can't take it. I'm from here. You can't rip away my Louisiana card. It ain't going nowhere. Good luck. Good luck. Man, Tyler Warren to me is a can't miss guy in this year's draft. Outside of maybe, like, it's interesting, right? This is a draft class that doesn't have a lot of blue chip guys, right? You think Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, depending on where you play him, right? Is he like, it's really funny, like that conversation, right? Is he better at one thing than the other wide receiver or corner? Or is he just like above average in both? And so we're kind of like dual scouting him in a way, but he's a blue chip guy in my opinion. Some people would say Ashton Jeanty as well. I know like running back conversation and positional value and everything can kind of interfere in that conversation too. But I think there are people that are willing to say that Ashton Jeanty is a blue chip prospect. And I don't know what it is about Tyler Warren that doesn't make him seem like a blue chip prospect outside of the two letters next to his name, TE. Because to me, he's one of the most talented players in this year's 2025 NFL draft class and is a bona fide star from the moment that you draft him. Now, maybe he needs a little bit more development, learning run protections, learning pass protections, all these other things. But I was on the New Orleans Saints podcast and we were discussing tight ends and all this stuff. And I just kind of like wax philosophic around Tyler Warren. And it's so hard not to, right? And you can do it without getting into the wildcat quarterback stuff. Because the fact of the matter is that, like, look, 104 receptions, led the team, led the conference, 1,233 receiving yards, and then 8 or 9 receiving touchdowns as well. Added another just under a handful of rushing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns on like 20 plus carries and just over 200 rushing yards, and then like threw a touchdown and stuff. And so like we could do the whole like, oh yeah, no, you could use them like a Taysom Hill and all this other stuff. Nah, you don't have to. And you'll still be able to find success with them. I think when it comes to Mason Taylor, on the other side of it, it's really just about the build of tight end that you really like, right? Do you want the a little bit more slight, a little bit more run after catch ability that comes with a Tyler Warren? Or do you like the big body, dirty work, more physical, bulked up type of guy like a Mason Taylor who, oh, by the way, ran a 4.65 while also benching 28 reps, showing you the strength and showing you the speed, a legitimate height, weight, speed, strength, agility prospect in both of these guys. And then there's Colston Loveland in there too. I didn't include Colston Loveland in this conversation initially just because I wanted to go first round versus day two. And Colston Loveland likely a first round selection. So I didn't want to go first round versus first round. But the idea here is, do you take a Tyler Warren at 9 or do you wait to potentially take a Mason Taylor at 40 or try your luck at 71 or package both of your third round picks, 71 and 93, to try to move up into the 50s or 60s to draft him at the end of the second round or something like that? I think I still roll with Tyler Warren at 9. I don't feel like the Saints have to rush for an edge rusher. You certainly don't want one of the project edge rushers at 9. Going offensive line doesn't make sense to me at 9 because you don't need a tackle and there's no reason to upset what's working. And so you could grab somebody that would be able to move into the interior for you, but you could also do that in the third or fourth rounds of this year's draft. Tate Radledge, somebody that I talk about all the time. Wyatt Milam, Gray Zabel in the second round. He's probably going to end up being a late first round pick, the guy at North Dakota State University. But you get the idea. Like, there are those players to be had later. Cornerback, we'll discuss here in a moment. Could be number 9. Would make a lot of sense. It's probably the biggest hole that's there outside of, to me, linebacker. But really with linebacker, it's about the future at linebacker, not your week 1 starter. Cornerback, you might be looking for your week 1 starter. So that would be a spot where I think it could make sense. Draft a corner at 9 and then wait for Mason Taylor or wait for Jayden Higgins at a later time. What could be an interesting conversation too is, if you have a Jayden Higgins, do you need a Mason Taylor? If you have a Tyler Warren, do you need a Jayden Higgins, right? Like, do those guys, they play different positions, but do they serve replicable roles or redundant roles as big-bodied pass catchers? I think you need an X, though. I think you need that big-bodied X wide receiver. So I do think there's a separate role for these guys. If you were to invest in the big tight end and the big wide receiver, I think there's value there. And so what if you went Tyler Warren at 9 and then Jayden Higgins at 40, if you got lucky? Or Tetairoa McMillan at 9 and then Mason Taylor at 40, going a little early there. I kind of like Tyler Warren and Jayden Higgins, I'm not going to lie. And so I'm not going to let Louisiana get to me. Louisiana typically rationalizes everything that I do for the most part, right? The amount of hot sauce I have in my cabinet, for instance, or the amount of times that I eat something based on the fact that I simply want hot sauce. Tyler Warren is the hot sauce of this draft for me, right? And I think that he could be somebody that would be a lot of fun in Kellen Moore's offense. Like, just to be serious for a second, both of these guys, Tyler Warren and Mason Taylor, you're not going wrong with either one. But do I like the athletic ability of a Tyler Warren with the ball in his hands? Yes. Do I like the athletic ability of a Tyler Warren and being able to use him in line, but then also as an F move guy that I can put in the slot, that I can use out wide, that I can kind of give them the Jimmy Graham role to, in essence of usage, right? Not trying to over exaggerate player value here, but just in essence of usage in terms of, not necessarily using him out of the backfield, not necessarily using him as a wildcat quarterback. Fun when you can, right? While Taysom Hill's healing up and everything. Don't think he's going to be ready for the beginning of the season. Maybe you can have Tyler Warren, have that be his early role of usage, and then you evolve him into the Jimmy Graham role over the course of time, much like you did with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham was not the big time weapon in 2010 that he was in 2011. 1 year makes a difference, right? And so while I really like Mason Taylor, while I think he's a really, really good player, and while I think he would be a home run selection at 40 or at 71 or a trade up, I don't think 40 is too early for him, but call me crazy, that's fine. I'm rolling with Tyler Warren at 9 as the preferred selection between those two. Just because of all the different things that you can do with him, just from a traditional tight end standpoint. Is he somebody you want blocking defensive ends one-on-one? No, but there's maybe 1 or 2 tight ends in this draft, the Georgia Tech guy, Jackson Hawes or whatever, like he and maybe 1 or 2 other guys that I'm like, yeah, okay, he can block the defensive end one-on-one, but I'm not putting Colson Loveland on a tight end one-on-one. I'm not putting Mason Graham on a tight end one-on-one. I'm not putting Tyler Warren on a tight end one-on-one, or I said all of those tight ends, but defensive ends one-on-one, excuse me. I'm never looking for the tight end defensive end one-on-one ever as an offensive, putting myself in the shoes of an offensive play caller. I never want that. So it doesn't matter to me that that's not a strength of Tyler Warren's. My big thing is, can you put your body in between my running back and their defensive back or their linebacker or their defensive end in that situation? I don't need you to do it in a passing game situation. So I'm going to stay traditional on this one. I'm going to stick to my board on this one. It's Tyler Warren over Mason Taylor for me. Let me know what you think. Coming up next, Will Johnson. Clean bill of health. Cornerback coming from Michigan with that hamstring injury, but I'm not so sure I would take him over Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. I'll tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. I might have one of the most unpopular opinions of this NFL draft class, and it's that I would take Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos and be just as happy and less concerned as I would be with Will Johnson out of Michigan at number 9. This is about investment and health. That's all that this is about. From a talent perspective, both of them are remarkable. In fact, Will Johnson, awesome, phenomenal when healthy. The concern for me is the hamstring. Now, he's been given a clean bill of health. He's doing visits with teams. All that is really good. But it's not really about him and his injury. It's about the Saints and his injury. A cornerback with a recurring hamstring injury just got traded away during the trade deadline last year. That was Marshawn Lattimore. Is that really another thing you're willing to invest in? Now, the Saints are doing some things. They've changed. They've gone a really nice direction with their sports science department, strength and conditioning department, all these other things. Maybe it ends up helping to keep players healthy in a way that the New Orleans Saints have not proven they have been able to keep players healthy basically since the COVID season, right? Really just like injury-riddled season after injury-riddled season. Some worse than others, for certain. But remember, they set a record a few years ago with the most starters in a single season. Now, COVID was a part of that too, so that kind of had that impact. But there were a lot of injuries there too. And so investing the top 10 selection in a cornerback that could show up and have this recurring hamstring injury, because remember, with hamstrings, it's not a matter of if, unfortunately, it's always a matter of when. Julio Jones, Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans, and these guys have played through it. Like I just named 3 fantastically talented players that continue to make moments, continue to have good seasons, continue to be strong stars for their respective teams. Julio Jones up to a point, right? Julio Jones wasn't he like a Titan for a second? He was an Eagle for a second. Like he just kind of had this weird end to his career to where he just kind of like jumped around a bunch of different teams. It's like one of those, he's going to be the answer. We're like, whoa, who's that player that you think looks weird in a jersey that doesn't make sense? He's going to have some of those for sure. But the hamstring thing is, it's not just New Orleans Saints specific. It's kind of an NFL thing, right? Managing the hamstring injury is all about when, not if. And so I might feel safer if I want to indulge at number 9 and go for a Tyler Warren, and then Jayden Higgins is off the board by the time that I roll around at 40, and I say, that's fine, I'll wait for Isaac Tesla in the 4th round or sometime in day 3 or something like that, or there maybe Trey Harris in the 3rd round at 71. Fantastic, right? And then if I could get Trey Amos right in the middle of that in round 2, I love that. 6 foot, 195 pounds, probably tested and worked out lighter in the offseason than he will play at the NFL level, oftentimes the case, is somebody that gives you good ball production, has been able to be disruptive, play long, play with good instinct, and play physical. He's kind of like another Paulson Adebo in a way, but with a lot less flags, right? A lot less flags to his name during his time at Ole Miss versus Paulson Adebo in the black and gold. Now, put Trey Amos in the black and gold, and let's see how many penalties end up popping up there, and then we can all go, together. But until that happens, I digress. But Trey Amos, physical player, good speed as well, 4.43, able to move so he can actually close that gap as well and keep pace with some of these speedy wide receivers in the NFL and in the NFC South, which the receivers are only going to get faster and faster. I assume that the Panthers are going to continue to invest in that position. Atlanta should be continuing to invest in that position as well. And the Bucs are still, big and physical, but also have added speed there between guys like Jayden McMillan, and they brought back Chris Godwin and everything. Like, you're going to need 3 corners in this division. You're going to need 3 corners in the NFL. You're going to need 3 starting caliber corners, and you have one in Isaac Yiadom. But is he where you want to go immediately, or are you willing to roll the dice on a cornerback early in this year's draft? I think you can be. Now, you can look at other corners later too. Noel Williams out of Cal. You got a little bit of a connection there with some of this coaching staff as well. You look at guys later on as well, like Kobe Bryant out of Kansas and others, Mac McWilliams in probably the last round of the draft at UCF. All of that, like that's certainly all there for you as a potential to be able to add more talent at the position. But if you want to go out there and find a day 1 starter, you can certainly find one in this year's draft in a Trey Amos. And so if you're not willing to invest early in round 1 ninth overall in a Will Johnson because of his injury history, in a Jahdae Barron, who I also really like as well, but in a Jahdae Barron who, there's questions about where he fits and where he plays in the NFL level. If the Saints truly see him as a nickel corner, which I don't think that they should, he's played almost his entire career as an outside corner. Like, what more do you need to see here? But if they're worried about that because of his size or anything like that, then you probably don't invest a number 9 overall selection in him. But then you have a guy that's got good ball production, 3 interceptions last year, 13 passes defended as well last season for Trey Amos in Ole Miss, who's played in the SEC, who's gone up against this top level competition, has spent time in Louisiana, spent time in the Alabama defense as well, which is what the New Orleans Saints are going to run something similar to this year with the Ripley's and the pattern matching and all this other stuff. Like, there's so much of those principles that Trey Amos is familiar with and ready to take that leap to the NFL with a knowledge of. I like that. I like the ability to be able to say, hey, remember what you did? Do that again. You know what I mean? And put them in a good situation. It's one of the reasons why I'm so interested and really am feeling very high on Kool-Aid McKinstry's, don't do that, Kool-Aid McKinstry's second year. Because he's going to be in a defense and a system that doesn't just use similar language like Dennis Allen's, but has similar principles in Brandon Staley's. And so I think that Trey Amos is somebody that would fit there too. And again, you look at Will Johnson, had a phenomenal career during his time at Michigan. The only big sticking point is the injury, the health, all those other things, like not being able to participate in basically anything over the course of the offseason. Now finally getting that clean bill of health in April. Are you comfortable with that? If you are, number 9 overall, easy pick. But if you're uncomfortable with it, number 9 has to be a home run for this team, in my opinion. And maybe that's unfair. If it's an unfair expectation, that's fine. I'd be willing to hear that criticism to me. I'd be willing to be criticized on that. However, I feel like number 9 is imperative to be a day 1 immediate impact player for this New Orleans Saints team. They did it last year with Taliesin Fuanga. They have seen good things from Brian Brzee, but then as you get to those other recent first-round picks, Trevor Penning had to change positions. Do we really know, right? Chris Olave, where's the health? 4 concussions in the since coming into the NFL, and additional head checks, like brain, concussion checks and things like that during that time too. Like, there's a lot of question marks still. Cesar Ruiz has gotten better, but is he living up to round 1 status? Some people would agree that he is. Some people would disagree and say that he's not. There needs to be no question at number 9. And so I don't know if you roll the dice on injury with that being the case. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode. Oh, first of all, let me know what you think, right? Jayden Higgins, Tetairoa McMillan at wide receiver, Tyler Warren, Mason Taylor at tight end, Trey Amos, Will Johnson at corner. And if you got other pairings, let me know, because we can discuss them here on the show too. It doesn't have to just be first and second round. We can go a little bit deeper into the third round as well. And speaking of that, I want to take a look at day 3 of the NFL draft and what potential starters the New Orleans Saints might be able to get with those 4th round selections. So I just kind of want to focus down a little bit on certain areas of the draft and give you a little bit of evaluation there. So let's do that in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Learn how the family's doing them, how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. I trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.